Hello and welcome back to Live from Nowhere, your podcast for all things Marvel and cinema. I'm your host Brandon.
And I'm Joe.
And today we are continuing with the MCU journey with the second installment in the franchise, and that is with my beloved, gamma-enriched Rage Machine, the Incredible Hulk. So, just to give some numbers about The Incredible Hulk, the film was released June 13th, 2008, and had a worldwide gross box office of $264 million, so half of what Iron Man made originally, and holds a 67% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which I think is one of the lower ratings in the entire franchise. It's directed by Louis Leterrier. I'm probably butchering that. It stars Edward Norton as Bruce Banner, Tim Roth as the Abomination, Liv Tyler as Betty Ross, and William Hurt as Thunderbolt Ross in the film. Although not as successful as Iron Man, it contributed to the broader narrative and began to build the universe further. So before we get into the ratings and categories, what are some of your thoughts and memories on the film?
I don't think I have any thoughts or any memories. And I know last time I talked about kind of not having thoughts or memories about Iron Man either, but I had some upon rewatch. I don't even really remember ever rewatching this movie. I couldn't tell you if I actually watched it for an Endgame Infinity War rewatch. I'm sure I did, because I do remember like some parts of it.
Yeah.
But as a whole, I think that this is just kind of the forgotten child of the MCU.
For sure. And so I'll just start with the disclaimer that Hulk is my favorite superhero. He always has been, as long as the MCU has been around. I'm just a huge fan of his complex character, of the brilliant Bruce Banner, all-powerful Hulk dynamic between the two of them. So he's always been my favorite character for as long, like I said, as long as the MCU's been around, since I was little. So this film just naturally has a strong place in my heart, and it's easier for me to look over the negative things, which I'm aware of. I know it's one of the bottom 3 films in the franchise, but I personally love it as a Hulk fan, so yeah.
So without further ado, let's get into grading this movie, but first, the intro. So, if you haven't seen the first episode, I recommend going and watching it. But what we're doing here is we have 10 categories. We're each going to be giving them a rating out of 5 and combining that score to give each movie a rating out of 100. And then we'll place it in a tier list, with the best being 95 and above, and I think the worst being 0 to 49, which is probably equally as hard to do. So, our first category is casting. Do these actors do justice to these characters? Does the audience get lost in the portrayal and really love these kind of just moments that they have? So, my score for The Incredible Hulk is actually a surprising 3.5.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, last time I knocked Iron Man for recasting Rhodey. And so it's a little hypocritical of me to be this high when they recast Ed Norton. But as I was watching the movie, I kind of had this internal dilemma about whether or not I liked Edward Norton more or less. And so it kind of brought it up for me, because even though they recast him, I was like, with Rhodey, I think that Don Cheadle's objectively better, and I say that in the most subjective way possible. But Ed Norton, I feel like there's an argument that he could be somewhat better than Mark Ruffalo, although I love Mark Ruffalo, so I don't really mind him being in the MCU at all. But also the kind of auxiliary characters, I really liked Abomination, I really liked William Hurt, I realize I'm now using character names and actor names, but I loved William Hurt, I loved just kind of the whole cast. I felt like was just kind of it was a fun time, and they meshed really well, and so it kind of went higher than I expected it. I have low expectations of this movie. So I went in thinking that I was going to rate it pretty low, and I'm surprised at how high it came out.
Yeah, so here is where I'm going to look kind of dumb for talking about how big of a fan I am about the Hulk. Because I gave casting a 1.5. And this, I'm coming from a pure logical standpoint, a pure how I'm approaching this category. When you look at casting, you're thinking of how well the casting was done for the role. And maybe it's not completely fair because a lot of it is Marvel's greater decision to bring characters back. But there was really only 2 characters from this movie that continued in the MCU. We're getting one back, supposedly, in New World Order. But the only 2 that have come back so far is Abomination, with Tim Roth reprising his role, and Thunderbolt Ross. Of course, rest in peace to the actor, but he was back in the MCU after the film. So when so many characters don't come back, even if it's like mostly the MCU's fault, I can't give it a knock, especially when the main character himself was recast. It's not like Rhodey, where Rhodey was a side character. Yeah. They recast the main character again. And I love how Ed Norton portrayed Bruce Banner, but I love Mark Ruffalo's portrayal. So with not many characters continuing on in the MCU and them recasting the main character, I feel like that just has to knock it down so much for me. And even though, like I said, I love this film, I have to do it for this category, so 1.5.
So I think that's fair. I think out of all the characters in this movie, like excluding Hulk, because obviously he's like the titular character, a lot of the auxiliary characters, I hated General Ross. Like in Civil War, like I talked about last time, it was like the first movie I really remember seeing on the big screen. I was like, man, this guy stinks. Like I hated him so much.
Yeah.
And so I think that goes to how good William Hurt played the character. So
that's fair. That's very fair.
But that brings casting to a whopping 5, which means it is actually our leader in being the worst. It is the worst rated of the 2. But
for that category?
Yeah, for casting. So next is storytelling. Does this film tell a comprehensive story? Is it easy to follow, or will the general audience get confused by the story this film is trying to tell? So I'm gonna, again, kind of just like last episode, I'm gonna stick with my rating and I'm gonna give it a 3.5. I think it wasn't actually a huge origin story. Like, of course there was origin elements to it, but I think something I appreciated is like, it didn't really bother going through the whole like showing us before he was Hulk and showing us like how he was created and stuff. Like, he was already Hulk, and now we were kind of thrown into the midst of that aftermath.
Yeah.
And I think part of that may come with a little bit of confusion for general audiences, but I think it is done in a way that actually, again, my favorite word of the last episode was thematically. I think it thematically made sense because you have Hulk and, as a byproduct, like Bruce Banner being panicked about what happened to him and not really knowing and having all this confusion, and the audience kind of feels that confusion because if you're not super familiar with Hulk and how he's created and why he was created, I think you can have some of that confusion because you get thrown into like almost the middle of a story, which, you know, could be a knock on it, but I think it actually was done pretty well.
Yeah, and so I'm going to agree with you. I give it a 4 out of 5. For me, I agree with what you were saying. It's very much like the what they did with Homecoming in Spider-Man. They were very cognizant that there was multiple franchises before them that displayed Spider-Man, and they were like, okay, the general audience in the world know how Spider-Man came to be. They know Aunt May, Uncle Ben, the Spider, how he comes to be Spider-Man. And I think the MCU and Marvel was cognizant of, oh, there were already Hulk films before this.
Yeah.
And those showed how he got the his abilities, if you will. But it's kind of a risk because I'm not sure if it was super popular. So again, the greater population probably still doesn't know how the Hulk came to be outside of like Marvel fans. But I don't know if you remember, but in the opening and throughout the film they show glimpses of like what happened. You know, him going in for the experiment and then something going wrong. It's still super vague.
Am I remembering incorrectly, but it's like the opening credits, like
it's the opening credits where like they're doing like title cards, but then like in the background of the title cards is basically like them going through the experiment and him becoming the Hulk. So I thought that was great that they kind of just chose to do it with those aspects. So I thought that was great. That brings a lot of the score for me. But again, they couldn't get too risky here. It is, again, very linear, and I almost feel like it's the go-to Hulk story. Government sees him as their property. We need the Hulk back. They don't quite realize what he is, and he's kind of unstoppable. And so it's basically military versus Hulk. So that's kind of like how the films go. It's very linear, easy to understand, digestible, again, like Iron Man, but enough to kind of keep building the universe.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the like slight glimpses and the slight exposition that explains it is just enough to keep audiences where they're not like completely confused, but still keeping some of like the mystery and kind of building that feeling around it.
Yeah.
So with that, our storytelling is a 7.5, which, if you're keeping track, that is now number 2 for our new worst category worst movie in that category. It might be a long day for Hulk. But once we start getting more movies, then it's not going to be like, okay.
Yeah.
Hulk either can basically lead or become the worst movie.
Yeah, either first or last.
It's kind of the nature of being on the second movie.
Yeah.
Next is character development. Do these characters grow throughout the story? Do the lessons they learn change them for better, for worse? And just, does what happened really matter? So, for mine, I went with a 3. And I think this is kind of something where it mainly hinges on Hulk, where he goes from someone who hates the Hulk and wants to get it out of him by basically it takes the entire movie, but by that last scene he's learning how to channel and control the Hulk. And I think you get that character development. But the reason it's still a little low is just because I always want character development from side characters, and I don't really know if we get that. Like we have, you know, the leader coming in at the end.
Dr. Blue.
Yeah.
Right.
Mr. Blue.
Yeah.
And like he's not really on screen enough. You have Abomination, and he doesn't really have development. He was always just kind of like a military guy who wanted to be the best fighter.
He was like Obadiah, like he just progressively got more evil.
And then I think maybe you see a random, I don't want to say random because it was warranted, but like a little bit of development from General Ross. But this is also kind of suffering from the other side now where, okay, we know this doesn't stick. Like I don't think he really developed. It was just like a moment of appreciation for what Hulk did and saves his daughter rather than actual substantial development.
Yeah.
And so like, there's not a lot going on. And I think the really the only development you see is between Bruce Banner and Hulk, and so that just kind of knocked it a little bit for me.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. It hinges a lot on the Hulk, which is why I also gave it a 3 out of 5. Bruce doesn't change drastically, but he changes from the fact of, I mean, there's the whole channeling the Hulk and learning to control it. That plot line kind of gets brushed away because once they go to Ruffalo, it's basically back to the beginning of the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a weird plot loose end, I guess. But yeah, nobody else really develops. I guess the only other aspect that I kind of appreciate is between Betty Ross and Bruce.
Yeah.
And Bruce choosing, because he's basically like, I can't have a life with you. If I always have this monster that can come out any time. And so I like that character development of choosing to not run anymore, to have a life with Betty. And so I thought that was pretty decent character development, but this can only go so high with many characters basically staying the same. Hulk not having a huge jump in character development, but like in some decent ways, but yeah, just okay.
So that brings character development to a 6, which again makes Hulk our biggest loser.
These are going to get better. I will be...
yeah, you're not really doing... I guess
I took care of almost all my weak categories. I'm coming in with some heavy hitters.
I mean, even weak, you still gave it a 4. I don't know if we can really...
For what?
For, didn't you gave it a 4 for... Sorry, my phone went off. What did you gave it a 4 for storytelling.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I don't know, I'm still doing good, but... Yeah, I'm talking up this movie too much.
So our next one is action. Action. Are there fight scenes that you will always remember? How are the powers of each character showcased? And so I think we're gonna agree here. And I gave action a 4. So I really liked the action in this movie, and I think that's because of the nature of displaying Hulk. I know that, again, like last time, I said I didn't like how Iron Man was just kind of able to handle everybody. And you kind of had that for the Hulk for the most part until you got to like the Abomination part of the movie. But what I appreciated in the action is like it wasn't always Hulk just like smashing. Like they did the action in interesting ways. With the Abomination fight, you have like a lot of fan service in that fight. You have him going Hulk smash.
Yeah.
You have
the thunderclap.
The thunderclap, which I didn't really remember this movie, and so when I was rewatching, I was like, oh, the thunderclap.
Yeah.
Like, it was pretty cool.
It's a trope.
And then I liked also when he used his environment. Like he made like arm shields and like
the car punching gloves. Yeah.
So like I liked that in showing, because Hulk's power is just punch and be strong.
Yeah, and he's not supposed to be an intelligent fighter.
Yeah.
He's just supposed to be stronger than everyone else.
So I liked that they showed it in a very unique way.
Yeah.
So I gave it a 4.
That's fair. This is where I'm starting to either show my bias or maybe there's some truth to it, but I gave action scenes a 4.5, so 9 out of 10. I think this is where the money is for these kind of films. For these films around Hulk, and with the character of Hulk, people want to see him just rampage through, armies or on people. That's where the money comes from for these films. They don't, no offense, but people, I don't feel, I can appreciate Bruce Banner, but I don't feel like most people are interested in Bruce Banner as the scientist, but people want to see the Hulk out moments, and there's certainly the best parts of the film. And this, I know, kind of like gets into visuals, but you have the fantastic scene where he's like stuck in like that bridge for the college, and they're throwing the grenades in there, and that build up, and then just erupting out of the bridge and just going to work on the military.
Well, I think it's so iconic that they, had to bring it back for What If, but it didn't end so great for him there.
No, no, it didn't. Not
That's
at all.
probably one of the more brutal What If scenes, actually.
It definitely is. And it was that whole episode, I was just like, okay, guys, you're taking all these other guys. What are you guys going to do for the Hulk, though?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's certainly a unique way to go, for sure.
Yeah.
But, and then, of course, there's the big fight with Abomination. You are at that point in the movie and you feel like, okay, Hulk's kind of just handling everything. The military kind of threw everything they got at him, and he took care of that. What else are they going to do? And now you, and this is going in other categories as well, but you have the trope of you have a bigger, stronger Hulk. Base level, essentially.
You laid yourself out last time.
I did.
You gave a preface so you could appreciate this one.
I did. There's some different dynamics here from last time, but it's definitely the same. It's the same trope as Iron Man. It's a bigger, stronger, or bigger, better version of the hero, sort of a thing. So, but yeah, I think the action scenes are what make this movie so. Whatever you want to think about this movie, I think this is where the movie makes its money, though. So
yeah. So with that means that action is up to a whopping 8.5,
Woohoo!
which does make it our leader in the action category.
Let's go.
I mean, if you're making your money on the action, you better be leading the action category. Next is the villain. How memorable is the villain? How much sense do their motives make? And do you understand their actions? So, I gave the villain a 3. I like Abomination. I think he was pretty cool. I don't know how... I mean, like, he was fine in, like, She-Hulk when he came back.
Yeah.
And...
It's not the same.
It's just, like, really... Sure, I don't know. She-Hulk was weird with that one. I didn't mind him. It was just kind of like a funny thing to add.
Yeah. Oh, and Shang-Chi.
He was in
Shang-Chi.
But I think in this iteration of Abomination, his motivations aren't that dissimilar to like Obadiah in terms of he just wants more power.
Yeah, we only have 2 villains here, so they're just compared to one another at this point.
He wants to be the best fighter he can be. He's basically dedicated to serving his life to the military, and he will do whatever he can to kind of like get to that point. And by the end, when he becomes Abomination, it's just him kind of spiraling out of control with his ego.
Yeah.
He had gotten beat up time and time again by the Hulk, and he was just kind of fed up, and he was like, okay, now it's time for me to do it. And so it's not like he is the most complex character, but also this is a Hulk movie. It's Hulk versus Abomination. I don't really need a super complex villain. It's almost like Godzilla versus Kong.
Yeah.
I do not care what Godzilla and Kong's motivations are. I want to see big monkey fight big lizard. Yeah. And that's kind of how the same it is here. I just want to see big green guy fight another big guy.
Yeah.
And so I think a 3 is fair.
That's fair. I matched you. I also did a 3 out of 5. There's only so much you can do when, again, the common trope of just a bigger, stronger Hulk, at least at base level. I thought Tim Roth, I enjoyed watching Tim Roth a lot more than Jeff Bridges. Personally, I thought they were both great, but there was this, like, even when he was a human, you kind of still felt like you didn't want to mess with him, or like he won't show you mercy, which was pretty terrifying. And you even saw it because it was almost like a anti-Captain America effect, because he would go and stand up straight to the Hulk, even knowing he's completely outmatched, but he just has this like rage in his eye as well.
He had a lot of Captain America moments, though, I feel like, where like when he was just a super soldier and he was like jumping around and fighting the Hulk, I was like, okay, he's pretty formidable. But also, I think the scene where he's running towards the Hulk,
he's breaking away.
I was like, okay, this is Captain America in Wakanda.
Yeah.
So he has a lot of Captain America moments.
Yeah, but like you said, don't need a complex villain. Just give Hulk somebody that can give him some competition, and he certainly did here. Hulk eventually was able to overpower him, but yeah, I thought he was a great villain. Of course, I love the Hulk, so I naturally love Abomination as well, just that pure brute strength, and I love how he kept craving more and more power. And yeah, but 3, just because it can only go so high. He's not super complex. He's a very I've used this word a lot too. He's a very digestible villain for the audience.
So that brings Hulk up to a 6 on our villain rating, which actually means it is tied with Iron Man for the lead in our villain category. So if you want to say it's got two now.
Yeah, the villains aren't amazing up to this point compared to what's to come, but they're okay.
Next is world building. How does this film expand the Marvel Universe? Does the audience leave the film knowing more about the universe and its contents? So for this one, I gave it a 2.5. And that kind of goes back to what you were talking about, where a lot of these characters actually didn't end up extending beyond this movie.
Yeah.
You had Abomination that eventually came back, like we said, in Shang-Chi and She-Hulk, but like inconsequential, to be honest. Like him coming back wasn't like, oh, Abomination's coming back for this big purpose. It was like, oh cool, Abomination's back.
Yeah, cameo. Until they pay it off with Wong, I don't know what all about, but
Wong is assembling the greatest team of all time. Otherwise, you really just have General Ross and then Hulk, who Hulk was a given, and you just have General Ross, who like becomes really important, especially in like Civil War, and so I think you have to give it a somewhat decent rating because of that. I also think we kind of loosely touch upon S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D. was a part of finding out, who decoding Mr. Green and Mr. Blue, so you kind of understand like a little bit of, they're not just in the background with these characters and trying to recruit like Iron Man and all these guys, but they're also still a part of the government. You understand that they're gonna kind of quote unquote work with the bad guys, even though it's like, okay, we kind of saw them in Iron Man as like these guys who are coming in to provide support. You can see that S.H.I.E.L.D. also has this other part of them. So just a 2.5 for me.
So we differ a little bit here, because I move all the way up to 3.5 out of 5. I had the same argument as Iron Man for a while. It's the same planet, same Earth that we know. There's various nuances because they're superheroes that aren't in our real life world, but it's basically the same world. There isn't like any exotic like locations. I mean, they what was it, Brazil they were in? I think it was Brazil. So they have some shots that are outside the US, but still nothing super crazy. And I just think like you were saying, a lot of the characters don't come back. Thunderbolt Ross becomes a pretty integral character. The character of the Hulk becomes super integral to the MCU, but Ed Norton doesn't. But the part that probably moved it from a 2.5 to a 3.5, like you had given it, was the Super Soldier program. Okay. Hulk was an attempt to make a super soldier that went wrong, right? And so that, and there was also, it's very subtle, but Stark Industries is kind of plastered throughout the film as well, in various spots. Like anytime they have like blueprints up on the screen or something, it typically says Stark Industries, so they're showing the Iron Man connection. But yeah, Hulk was supposed to be, Bruce was supposed to be a super soldier. But it went horribly wrong, obviously. And they were trying to recreate what happened to Captain America. So there is that aspect of the super soldier, like continuing on with that plot line, I guess, which becomes pretty integral to the MCU, I would think, in various storylines. And there is some storylines about, trying to get Hulk's blood and so on. So that part of, Hulk's blood and setting up the super soldier program and super soldier serum is pretty integral to various parts of the MCU. So that's kind of what brought up to 3.5 for me.
Yeah. I think with that, I'll give it a 3. I'll boost it a little bit.
Okay.
Super Soldier is really important. It's kind of the same as like thinking about the CGI of Iron Man. I think I can give it a 3 for that.
Yeah, because that was I would have put it lower, but then I forgot that was a part of it, and I was trying to get my timelines correct. But Captain America did it first. They were trying to recreate it, did it horribly wrong, ended up creating the Hulk, and even. Winter Soldier was an attempt at, making a super soldier, and all these various ways that people were trying to make
eventually the Flag Smashers.
Yeah. So, just various ways that people were trying to make themselves superhuman.
So with that, it puts the Hulk at a 6.5 for world building.
Okay.
Which makes it. I'm going to stop saying worst. It makes it second.
Yeah.
It makes it second in our world building category.
If you see the worlds that are in other movies, that these categories can only get so high right now.
Yeah.
So.
Next is visuals. How visually stunning is this movie? Does this movie have iconic shots that leave the audience in awe? So for me, I went with a 3.5. I think, in thinking about the design of Hulk first, I don't love the design of Hulk, actually. I do prefer, 2012 Avengers Hulk, I think, is the best MCU version of the Hulk.
That's fair.
So, it knocks it a little bit for me. I don't think the CGI itself is that bad. I just don't really love the design of it. But otherwise, I think the movie is just fine. But a lot of it, kind of like the argument with Iron Man, is does the CGI still hold up? I think less so than Iron Man.
Oh, interesting.
I think the suit up scene I think it's a little bit of being iconic, where Iron Man's suit up scene is iconic. So I think I say it holds up a little bit better. But I think it doesn't. It's not jarring. It doesn't look bad. It's just it's still good, especially for the time it was in. And so I think you have to boost it there. But I also do think that there's some really good shots. I enjoy the warehouse scene where, again, I keep going back to the Rogue One Darth Vader scene. But
for sure.
But Hulk is grabbing people and throwing them out, and it's okay, there's this monster in the darkness.
But I have no idea what he is or any. Yeah.
That's a really iconic, I think, visual of the movie. Obviously, you have a lot of his roars and stuff. And I think he was just. There maybe isn't as many iconic scenes in terms of this is going to be my screen saver, this is going to be my lock screen. But there's a lot of good visuals in portraying who the Hulk is, even if it's just him all the way in the darkness.
Yeah. So I'm a little bit higher here. I give it 4 out of 5. For most of the movie, it's a lot of dialogue. It's a lot of regular humans talking to each other in places we are very familiar with. So visuals are, I dock it a little bit for that. Again, this is action scenes. This is where the Incredible Hulk is again making its money, because the CGI, I personally think, still holds up today. I think it's just as good as Iron Man. We can have a conversation about his design of him versus the Mark Ruffalo Hulk, which I prefer. But there was definitely something about that massive 12-foot, huge muscles of the Hulk that were you got a true sense of like his size and like strength, and it's not that it's not evident in Mark Ruffalo's Hulk. It's just it's kind of like they're two different like they have two different types of workouts almost like the Hulk in this movie is extremely shredded, almost Wolverine like. But yeah, I think the CGI in him in Abomination is fantastic. Holds up super well today.
I think one of the visuals I didn't mention, but you just kind of reminded me with Abomination, is him becoming Abomination, where his like spine starts cracking.
Oh yeah,
that's a really good scene as well.
Yeah, and then we can even start to go with like Hulk's like hulking out moments, like the scenes, you know, where his eyes start to change color, and it's they don't just put a camera on him and show you him hulking out. You get various aspects of what's happening, and even at the end, you never get a true shot of him hulking out. But yeah, that like raw brutality of him turning into Abomination, or even when Bruce is trying not to, when he's on the table and he's like strapped down and he's starting to. Those are great visuals. I love the visual that you talked about with the warehouse. That's some cinematography that's really excellent, and we didn't really get to see the entire Hulk there.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
It was a really good choice.
Yeah, for sure, because it's like you have this idea of what the Hulk is, but they tease it and he'll come back later on. That's why that bridge scene was so iconic, because that's the first time we see the full force of the Hulk. But yeah, so I would say 4 out of 5, because there's some of my like absolute favorite visuals with the Hulk in the entire MCU, but can only go so high because, again, most of the movie is just regular people talking in a regular world.
So between the three, you have Mark Ruffalo's Hulk, you have Professor Hulk, and then you have this Hulk. How would you rank those three then, as an avid Hulk lover?
I would
in terms of just visuals, like
in
this
terms of
design.
just visuals. That's tough. I probably do, like most people will call it savage, like Mark Ruffalo Hulk. I thought that was the best iteration. Then I probably then do this Hulk for, again, he's just absolutely savage. But this Hulk almost has more emotion and humanity than that savage Mark Ruffalo Hulk.
Yeah, he talks more.
Yeah, he does, and you saw so much we haven't talked about it yet, but he showed a lot of expression and emotion anytime Betty Ross was involved in the scenes. So
precursor to Black Widow almost.
Yeah, pretty much. And he eventually gains that like emotional intelligence, but he's not quite there yet. It's just, I see a threat and I'm going to try to kill it at that point. And then probably Professor Hulk last. There's a whole... I'm not saying I don't like Professor Hulk, but
it's not the Hulk you're looking for.
No, I can do a whole episode about Professor Hulk, but just in a nutshell, it's a natural progression of his character. It's a very clean way to like complete his arc in a way, but... the Hulk, that Savage Hulk, I think certainly needs to come back and be around in some way. So that's how I would rank him. Yeah. What would you say?
I would agree. I would go 2012 like Savage Hulk. I would go Ed Norton's Hulk, and then I would go Professor Hulk.
Yeah. Like the 2012 Hulk is like bulking Hulk, and then this one's like shredding, and then you have Professor Hulk, who's
nerd.
Yeah, he's like into yoga and
he does Pilates.
Yeah, but yeah, that's probably what I would do.
CrossFit. He does CrossFit.
Yeah, he does CrossFit for sure.
So that brings visuals to a 7.5, which ties it with Iron Man. So another category that Hulk can say it has a first ranking in.
Woo!
But probably not this next one. Soundtrack. Does the score of this movie help advance it? How has it left a lasting impression in your mind? So I gave the soundtrack a 1. It leaves no impression in my mind. I couldn't tell you a single song from it. It's just like, it's really nothing for me. I considered giving it a 0 just because I couldn't think of literally anything. But I, again, have to give props to the sound effects and the fall of the artists.
Yeah.
Hulk's roars, I think, are really good. And I think it's like, it's almost guttural. Like, he has guttural roars that I think are just phenomenal, and it adds a layer to his character. So for that reason, I couldn't justify giving it a 0 because the sound effects team went in. But otherwise, there's nothing here for me, really.
Yeah, I'm a Hulk fan, but this is getting a 1 for me as well. Again, there's no songs, there's no iconic scores, but again, the only thing stopping it from 0 is those sound effects. Hulk's roar is probably, in my opinion, one of the most iconic roars in cinematic history. Probably up there with like the T-Rex roar from Jurassic Park.
What about the MGM lion, man?
The MGM lion. You have like Godzilla's roar. Just, the roar that you feel puts the fear of God in all of the opposition that they're against, So I think that's fantastic. A lot of the fight scenes have excellent sound effects. I'm still reaching here.
Yeah.
No songs, no iconic score. 1 out of 5.
So that'll bring us to a whopping 2. If
This might be the worst soundtrack in the MCU. It could very well be. I'm not sure. I have to check the others, but this could very well be.
to get a lower score, you are truly going to have to get basically have no iconic songs, but also have horrible sound effects.
Yeah,
Like,
or
to
even
get
not
any-
horrible, but nothing super iconic. Like
Yeah.
the Hulk's roar is very iconic.
Yeah,
so.
I think to get lower, it's going to be pretty hard.
Yeah.
But that puts it in its in second place, where it might stay at the bottom for a while.
Yeah.
Next is the post-credit scene. How excited does the post-credit scene make you for the future of the MCU, and was it worth the wait? So I gave the post-credit scene a 4. It's a little bit of a step down from my Iron Man score, and I think that's just because it wasn't as momentous as like introducing the Avengers, because we already knew this was happening.
Yeah.
And this is just kind of almost a continuation of that post-credit scene. But it's still exciting because it's a continuation of such a great post-credit scene where it's like they're building the Avengers, but also we got to see Tony Stark and Iron Man again, and he's recruiting, and it's like, oh, he's taking like a leadership role in this. And so I really liked that, but I also liked seeing like how almost defeated General Ross was. And
Yeah, like I need a drink after that.
it was just like, man, I've been through so much, and I think it kind of gives a little bit of additional character to General Ross, because it was like, okay, he kind of didn't hate the Hulk at the end. He was kind of,
He's like, he's government property, I'm trying to get him back.
he's kind of has this mutual respect for the Hulk, I think, at the end. But I think seeing him drinking and seeing him in this bar and just exhausted, it makes his eventual like kind of turn back to like, we need to control everybody. It makes sense.
Yeah.
It was like, it was a long day for him. He needed any help he could get, and he got it from the Hulk. And there's a mutual respect in that moment, but he's still like exhausted and stuff. So I think that layer was really helpful, but also I would say a good 90% of the score is like Tony Stark's back.
Yeah. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. Again, not as momentous, but when I was thinking about this, when they did the first post-credit scene, there was a guarantee that the MCU was going to do a post-credit scene again.
Yeah.
It wasn't commonplace. This set up a pattern. This was, post-credit scenes are an MCU thing, and each time there's this fun little sneak peek of what's coming ahead.
Yeah.
So, again, it's just, okay, we got Iron Man, so who's next? Now we're gonna go get the Hulk. So I thought that was cool. The dynamic between Thunderbolt Ross and Tony Stark was kind of cool. I forget the exact dialogue. Do you remember what they said exactly?
I don't remember exactly. It was just like basically talking about like he has a problem and he got beat up. Like,
you got a Hulk problem. I might have a solution.
Yeah.
Sort of a thing. And you can trace what they call them, the science bros relationship, all the way back to here, because at this moment Tony was very aware of who the Hulk was, and he mentions it like call back in Avengers, and so their relationship kind of almost begins here in a way, in terms of like an awareness of one another, or at least Tony's awareness of the Hulk. So not as high as the first one, but we're definitely you take another step, you feel more momentum towards that eventual Avengers team up.
Yeah. And so that brings the post-credit scene to a pretty respectable 8.5.
Okay.
It is
That's good.
second place for our post-credit scene category, but still very, very respectable. Which brings us to our last category.
Yep.
Rewatchability. How likely are you to watch this movie again? Is it a movie that you will watch time and time again and put it on for your family or friends? And for me, I actually gave it a little bit of a higher score than I typically would. I said at the beginning, like, I don't ever really remember watching this movie. But upon rewatching it, I was like, I'll watch it. I would watch this again. So I gave it a 3.
Okay.
3 is kind of what I use as my average score, and I think it's a movie that I forget about a lot, and I think it's not the fault of the movie itself. I think it's part of it is something we didn't really talk about that much already, is that it's a partnership with Paramount.
Yeah, not full-blown Marvel product.
So I think that's part of the reason why it's so forgotten. It's like the Paramount kind of aura around it. It's like it wasn't a full MCU movie. It was like MCU meets Paramount. It's like
Is it Paramount or Universal, or am I getting too confused?
Universal. Sorry.
Okay.
I don't think Paramount might have had some Marvel thing at first.
I don't know if maybe Paramount's owned by Universal, but it's definitely Universal.
I'm just gonna Google. Did Paramount ever have any Marvel rights? Because
maybe.
They owned the distribution rights to the Avengers and Iron Man 3, but sold them to Disney in 2010.
A little bit over my head, but...
Yeah. I actually didn't know that, but it's definitely Universal.
Yeah.
But I think that...
but it still stands.
Still, the point stands is that there's the Universal is owning the rights to this, so they kind of have a hand in it, it's just like not a full Marvel movie, and I feel like it would be somewhat similar to, I guess you could equate it to the Spider-Man movie, but I think Marvel has more ownership over that. It feels like, I don't know why exactly that's saying. I think Spider-Man just maybe, he's not even more iconic, I would say. Hulk's pretty iconic. I don't know why Universal gets a different treatment than the Sony does, because it's basically the same partnership. It's just something that's happened, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. Universal holds on tight to the Hulk. Marvel can't even make a solo film with him. That's why he's only been like not a side character, but like a character in like a team up film or somebody else's film. So,
I mean, there is hope. There's rumors that Marvel's making a Namor movie or series, which, if they can do that with Namor, that seemingly means that they could probably do it with the Hulk, because Universal also held rights to Knowhere. So
I thought I had heard a while back that it wasn't because Universal was about to get nice and just give up the Hulk. I think their contract or their shared partnership was ending, and then Marvel gets full attainment of the Hulk. But I'm not confident in my like facts and sources.
Either way, it may end up.
It could.
coming back. But either way, let's get back to. So I gave it a 3. What'd you give it?
I gave it a 4. Most of this rides on the fact that Hulk's my favorite character. I love Bruce and Hulk's dynamic. I love a lot of the fight scenes. It's not a 5 because it's, again, not the first movie I would go for, but like, I guess before streaming, if it was like on TV and if it was like on like FX around like other movies, that would be the one I choose, because I think I think this movie's really fun if you're looking for, again, like Iron Man, a good action movie. It only does so much, kind of like world building. It only does so much for future MCU stuff. So you can't really watch it in that aspect as much. But yeah, it's a fun action movie. Hulk's just my favorite, so it gets up to a 4 naturally. But yeah.
So that brings rewatchability up to a 7 here. And now we have all 10 of our categories good to go. So it's time for the final score of Your Beloved Hulk. A 64.5.
It's Rotten Tomatoes is 67.
So we're pretty consistent.
Yeah.
We're a little bit lower, I guess, than Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
In recalling my Letterboxd rating of it, gave it a 2 out of 5, which would be equivalent to a 40. But after rewatching, I did boost it up to a 3. I enjoyed it more now, which is about in the 60s.
Yeah.
I think my personal score, if I can pull it up, was a 31.5, which is, what is that, a 63? So that's pretty consistent. You gave it a 33. So we were pretty close to one another.
Yeah.
But a 64.5, which makes it the first movie in our civilian class category, which is the 50 to 70, and obviously puts it as our second ranked movie of the 2 so far, with Iron Man still being in the lead.
Out of 2.
But how do you feel about where this movie ends up?
I'm very much not surprised. As a Marvel fan, I'm very aware that it's probably bottom 3 in the entire MCU, up there with the Thor Dark World and those types of movies. So I'm aware that it's not well received in the public. My personal love for the Hulk can only go so far. I love it personally, but I know how the public feels. So personally, I'm not surprised, honestly.
I know this seems bad for The Incredible Hulk. I think it makes sense as well. I think it's one of the least liked Marvel movies.
Yeah.
But if there's a Hulk fan out there that's really devastated by this and doesn't want to see The Incredible Hulk be the worst movie in our MCU rewatch, I will say 2 things to you. 1, it is probably going to stay there for a while. It will be the least rated movie for a little bit. But when we get to Quantumania, I'm telling you, I don't know exactly how you feel about it, but my score alone is gonna tank it all the way below.
I'll do my best for all the Ant-Man fans out there to keep it alive, but yeah, I also...
Quantumania is going down. So any Hulk fan, when we get to Quantumania, that will be your redemption episode. At least I'll make sure of it.
Yeah, I also feel like we can add that it's definitely one of the movies that feels the least MCU-like.
It just feels so disconnected. I think, again, it goes to that Universal thing, but I don't know how fair that is because of the Sony one. It's like, it's not like if Sony and Marvel, like if Marvel, I guess it would be the equivalent of like Venom is in the MCU. Like Venom is the MCU movie. I feel like that would feel very disconnected.
Yeah.
But that's because Sony's the main kind of creator of it, and then it comes to the MCU. And maybe it was just that because of this movie and this partnership with Universal, Marvel knew what they wanted to do with the whole. I mean, they knew what they wanted to do with Spider-Man. This kind of served as a precursor to how to do effective partnerships.
Yeah.
I just really don't know.
Yeah, but I think if Marvel was able to make a solo Hulk film, I think this could have definitely got higher than it did. Hulk suffers from being fairly one-dimensional, which is why solo films are typically tough to do, because he's kind of just the brute part of the team. So that's also why I think a solo film hasn't been done outside of just rights. It's tough sometimes to do a solo Hulk film unless you have the right storyline. And they've made him more complex as time goes, but again, he's been very one-dimensional for most of the MCU. So he's kind of just been like part of the team, but never the guy.
Yeah. Well, with that, episode 2 comes to a close. Hope you enjoyed it, and next time we have our first sequel coming.
Yeah, it's like Pixar. Wow, we couldn't get to an original film. We're already back to Iron Man.
Yeah, so we will be going through Iron Man 2. But until then, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.
Thank you.